Listen, this isn't just royal drama. This is the kind of story that makes the palace walls feel too thin, the air feel too loud, and one name feel like it can detonate an entire bloodline, the so-called Saudi Dossier. And for a long time, people whispered about it like it was just another internet fever dream, until the moment Princess Anne allegedly stopped playing polite and, behind closed doors, let the truth of its existence hit the room like a slap. Because here's what's sending shockwaves through every corner of royal watching Britain. The claim isn't simply that a file exists, it's that people at the highest level were warned years ago, and that warning was ignored until it became a nightmare no one could keep quiet about. According to the script you provided, this all reportedly boiled over on January 16, 2026, during a closed-door briefing at Clarence House. Not a public announcement, not a press statement, not some tidy palace line, a private room, private faces, private panic. And Princess Anne, the royal who doesn't do theatrics, allegedly confirmed that this dossier is real. Not necessarily that every claim inside it is proven, just that it exists and that it's been sitting there like a loaded weapon in the family's hands. Imagine the temperature in that room. The script describes King Charles as wounded, but not surprised. That's the kind of phrase that sounds like a man who's heard enough behind-the-scenes whispers to know when a scandal isn't just gossip, it's history catching up. Prince William reportedly walked out, not argued, not debated, just gone, like the air itself offended him. And then there's Prince Harry, described as completely devastated, reportedly in tears. Because if you're Harry, you're not just hearing that people questioned your marriage, you're hearing that people questioned the entire origin story of your life's most explosive decision. And the internet, according to your script, it went feral. Saudi dossier and Princess Anne trending, everyone suddenly acting like they always knew something was off. But here's the darker piece. The claims in this file aren't framed as messy relationship stuff. They're framed, again, allegedly, as intelligence-style concerns, the kind of red flags that aren't about who said what at Christmas dinner, but about how someone gets close to power. The script claims British intelligence, name-checked as MI6, began compiling material in late 2016 as part of security vetting because Meghan Markle was getting close to a senior royal. Now, let's be crystal clear. This is presented as allegations within your provided text, not verified fact. But the narrative is chilling. It claims investigators found discrepancies between Meghan's public life story and parts of her private travel history. And then the story gets specific in a way that makes people sit up straight. It claims that between 2009 and 2012, Meghan was allegedly seen on Mediterranean super yachts in places like Antibes, Monaco, Capri, and the Turkish Riviera at events hosted by wealthy, globally connected figures, Middle Eastern financiers, Russian art brokers, and people described as linked to Gulf intelligence circles. The script even throws out an eye-popping estimate of alleged travel and accommodation costs over $1.4 million, paired with the argument, how could she afford that on her reported income? Then comes the Monaco detail, the one that's designed to make the audience do the math with their jaw hanging open. The script claims that in 2011, during the F1 weekend, Meghan allegedly stayed at the Monte Carlo Bay Hotel and Resort in a penthouse suite said to cost over $6,500 per night, while her reported annual income that year is described as under $40,000. Whether those exact figures are accurate or not, the point of the narrative is clear. It wants you to feel that the lifestyle and the income don't match, and that mismatch is the spark that lights the entire dossier mythos on fire. The script even introduces a term, shadow patron, as something a financial tracing unit supposedly uses for people who bankroll access without leaving a clean paper trail. And the moment that phrase enters the story, it stops sounding like celebrity gossip and starts sounding like a chessboard. Because now the question becomes, if someone was helping, why and who benefits? And right there, the script paints the most brutal emotional scene. It claims Princess Anne confronted Harry back in early 2017 with the dossier, asking who was paying for all of this. And Harry's alleged response? 5 words that sound romantic until they sound reckless. I don't care. I love her. Because love is powerful, but love doesn't explain penthouses, yachts, private rooftops in Istanbul, or being seated next to people with sovereign wealth level influence. The script insists the dossier doesn't outright call Meghan a spy, but uses a phrase like strategic social placement, a way of suggesting someone can be positioned near influence even if they're not an agent themselves. Again, this is the story being told in the provided text, not a verified conclusion. And then we hit the alleged architect of the entire setup, Marcus Anderson, described as as a behind-the-curtain operator tied to Soho House, a person the narrative paints as a gatekeeper who pairs personalities with power. It claims MI6 had a psychological profile on him, describing him as a facilitator who helps engineer high-visibility relationships. And if you're watching this like a thriller, this is the moment the camera zooms in. Because now it's not how did they meet, it's was the meeting arranged like a domino? The script then points to Soho House Istanbul's opening in May 2015, a year before Harry and Meghan supposedly met, as a crossroad event filled with Gulf-soft power figures and Western cultural assets, allegedly not open to the public, allegedly selective. And it claims Meghan wasn't on the official guest list, but that internal logs showed Anderson manually added her. The narrative frames it like a test, a vetting, a final step before placement. And when you stack all these claims, yachts, luxury seasons, vanishing from LA for weeks, high-level events, no clear money trail, the script's conclusion becomes the emotional knife twist. It alleges Harry didn't just fall in love. He walked into something he didn't understand, and the people who tried to warn him were treated like villains. And that brings us right back to that 2026 closed-door moment, Princess Anne allegedly holding a copy of the file for years, finally sliding the reality of its existence across the table like, no more pretending this was never a thing. And if Harry really broke down the way the script describes, it's because in that moment, denial doesn't protect you anymore. It's in that moment, your heart isn't arguing with your family, it's arguing with time. And here's where the story, as told in your script, stops being about who said what and starts being about who knew, who stayed quiet, and who now has to live with the fallout. Because after that alleged Clarence House moment in 2026, Princess Anne confirming the dossier exists, Harry reportedly shattered, William gone, Charles silent, the real earthquake isn't public. It's private. It's the kind that rattles relationships that were already cracked and turns distance into permanent fracture. Think about Harry in that room if events unfolded the way your material describes. For years, he defended Meghan Markle against tabloids, against courtiers, against his own family. He burned bridges, crossed oceans, detonated royal tradition, all in the name of protecting his wife and building a new life. And then, suddenly, he's sitting in front of a confirmation that a file, a serious, intelligence-flagged file, was real enough to be preserved, discussed, and resurfaced nearly a decade later. Not rumor, not just palace paranoia, something official enough that Princess Anne never threw it away. The emotional weight of that is brutal, because it's not just they didn't like her, it's they believe there were risks, patterns, unanswered questions, and you chose love over warning. And love, in hindsight, can feel like loyalty or like blindness. The script paints Harry's devastation not as anger, but as collapse. Not fury at Meghan, not instant blame, but the kind of heartbreak that comes when two realities can't coexist anymore. The woman you fought the world for, and the possibility, however unproven, that powerful institutions were quietly alarmed from the beginning. And then there's King Charles III, wounded but not surprised. That line says everything. It suggests a man who had already seen the reports, already heard the briefings, already lived with the quiet dread that someday this might surface again. A father torn between protecting his son and protecting the crown, and knowing he might not be able to do both. Because if he pushed too hard back then, he'd lose Harry. If he stayed silent, he'd be accused later of doing nothing. That's the royal trap. Every option costs blood. Prince William walking out as described is its own statement. William has always been portrayed as the cautious one, the heir raised to see risk before romance. If he'd already voiced concerns years earlier, as many royal watchers have long suspected, then this moment wouldn't feel like new information to him. It would feel like confirmation, the worst kind, the kind that doesn't make you feel right. It makes you feel sick. But the center of gravity here is still Meghan, because the Dossier narrative, as told in your script, doesn't just question events. It questions the story, the fairy tale arc, the self-made rise. It suggests there were powerful circles, elite networks, high-level social environments that intersected with her life in ways that don't fit the simple Hollywood to palace narrative. And whether those intersections were innocent, strategic, exaggerated, or misunderstood, the mere existence of such a file turns her biography into a battlefield. Imagine being her, hearing that a royal intelligence-style document has your past mapped, your travel dissected, your associations analyzed, that people in the palace once looked at your life and didn't just see a love interest, they saw a potential variable in matters of state. That's not gossip. That's surveillance-level scrutiny. And even if nothing in it is proven wrongdoing, the implication alone is radioactive. The scripts focus on luxury travel, elite guest lists, high-cost environments, all framed as mismatched with reported income, is meant to build a narrative of unseen support. But emotionally, it also builds something else. The sense that Meghan was never just marrying into a family. She was walking into a fortress that had already run background checks on her soul. And now, years later, that fortress is saying, we tried to warn you. Not publicly, not on record, but inside rooms where history is decided before headlines ever exist. The alleged earlier confrontation between Anne and Harry in 2017 becomes tragic in hindsight. Her saying this wasn't accidental. Him saying he didn't care. That exchange, if it happened the way the script claims, becomes the emotional prequel to everything that followed. The exits, the interviews, the documentaries, the lawsuits, the interviews that shook the monarchy. Because if he felt judged back then and they felt ignored, then every later clash was just the aftershock of that first fracture. And let's talk about timing. The dossier, according to your material, allegedly began forming before the engagement, before the wedding, before the world picked sides. Which means, in this narrative, the palace's discomfort wasn't born from press drama. It was born from internal briefings, from men and women whose job is to imagine worst-case scenarios and protect national stability, not romantic happiness. That difference in perspective is the tragedy, one side fighting for love, the other guarding an institution older than democracy. So when Princess Anne finally confirms the file is real, years later, it's not about humiliation. It's about finality. It's about saying this chapter was never imaginary. These concerns existed whether you agreed with them or not. And once that truth is acknowledged, silence becomes impossible. But here's the twist that makes this story linger like smoke. Confirmation of a dossier's existence is not confirmation of its conclusions. Intelligence files are full of possibilities, patterns, suspicions, not courtroom verdicts. Yet emotionally, for Harry, that distinction might not matter. Because even if nothing was proven, the fact his wife was ever viewed through that lens by his own family is enough to feel like betrayal from both sides at once. Betrayal that they doubted her. Betrayal that he dismissed them. Betrayal that love and duty collided and neither side walked away whole. And that's why this story refuses to die. Not because of yachts or penthouses or guest lists, but because at its heart is a prince who chose his heart over his heritage, and a family that believes heritage exists to survive hearts. So now the question hanging in the air isn't, was the dossier right? It's far more painful. If warnings were given and ignored, can trust ever come back? And if they weren't, why did the palace ever let such a file define how they saw the woman Harry loves? That's the wound. That's the silence. That's the reason this isn't just scandal, it's tragedy wrapped in protocol. And the worst part, no matter which side you believe, the family is still broken. The family is still broken. The family is still broken. The family is...